BIM GIS Facilities Management, the Implications of Web Services for the buidlingSMART Alliance, a commentary by Onuma. I'm going to start just with a short explanation of how web services works today on the internet or on mobile devices. For example, if I have this site that says I want to go from LAX to JFK and I do a search, this application actually what it's doing is it's going and looking at what the current conditions are at JFK, for example, or how flight delays have historically happened in the past, and which airlines have certain types of delays, average delays, for example. So I could scan down this list and quickly see that United is not doing too well, and Delta looks pretty good, and JetBlue is something's going on with JetBlue down here. And there's all kinds of live charts and everything being built up on the fly from the available data that could come from multiple sources. And that's kind of the key thing here, that this data could come from many different places. What's really interesting about this also is the source of the data. So if I go to the source file here, it actually shows where this information is coming from. So for example, if I want to find a list of airports, there's an airports button here, and it lists all the airports top to bottom here as a web page in HTML, and there's also the XML source code or the XML source for that airport list. And you'll see that in XML. It's not as pretty, obviously, but it has all the airport codes. This is coming from some server. I don't really know where it's coming from, probably from the FAA. I haven't never looked at this XML code before, but it looks like it's fairly well structured, and I could probably develop an application around that. And this actually is another key point about XML. Yes, there are many flavors of XML, but I really don't care as long as they're structured and I can use them. And that's the difference here, is that this is all usable right now. Another interesting thing here is I can say, okay, I want to see routes from one airport to the other. So I go routes from Orlando to LAX. This is, oh, I'm sorry, O'Hara to LAX. And I could type that in here as well. Or if you look at the URL here, I can actually even just change that URL and change it to JFK, and now it just jumps back to JFK. So it's building it on the fly from this HTML code. The point here is that these web services allow different users to create different applications. I can go in here and use this information here and even create an app on an iPhone, for example, if I wanted to pull data from this, for example, as one example. Obviously this is about flights, but what I'm suggesting also is that this also works for BIM on government sites as well too. So on data.gov, if I go to data, raw data, you can search all kinds of things. So if I go interactive data sets, I can search for GSA star, for example, and I'll go look for GSA star codes for, let's see, where is it? Right here. Star for lease information, star for, let's look at inventory of buildings. So this is GSA's inventory of buildings, and there's about 9,800 buildings in this list. It's coming from some server. Again, I assume this is GSA's, or it might be parked on a government site. It really doesn't matter to me as a developer, as long as I can get to this. This is just in a web interface with a list of information. I can reorder things and everything. But the most interesting part here is if I go to the export button, and there's all kinds of exports here. I can export it as a CSV file. It downloads a CSV file and grabs a CSV file of all the buildings, and for GSA, builds it on the fly, etc. Or I can go to the XML file. Again, I don't know what the XML structure is. I really don't care. As long as it's a structured format that I can use, and that's fine. And then the most important one actually is the API button. So if I go to the API button here, API is the most interesting because it's telling me how I can actually access this data through an API. And if I look closer at the developer documentation, it talks about how to get to it with REST, for example. So as a software developer, I have an easy way to go and grab data that is shared from this GSA star of inventory of buildings. So the point here is that it's actually possible to create tools from this data. And this is possible for buildings. This is a building list, but imagine extending this into what's happening with buidlingSMART. So let's contrast this for a second to what's going on with the Building Smart project. I know this is still in transition and in development, so I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything. I'm just I'm making a commentary on how this works here. So if I go to this product guide for the SPIE template search and I do a search, it finds, I search for air handling and find something about an air handler here. It seems like there's a database in the background driving this information, so there is structured information in the background to find information about this air handler. And it develops this output here for downloading different formats, including HTML. The HTML page here, and some other formats. It's XHTML, IFCs. Okay, so this is all great, but how do I get to the source data? What we need here is some sort of an API that can actually search this. This is really valuable information, but it seems like it's embedded into these pages or IFC files with like warranty information and different standards here that would actually help me a lot as a software developer, but it's pretty useless if I can only look at it like this. So I'm hoping that this development is heading towards creating an API that we can get to the information. Even this data right here, like the Omni class, table 23, I mean, this is incredibly valuable as well if we had a way to get to and they're mapped from one to the next. So there's a lot of work that's already been done here that it would be nice to be able to pull this table as an API into a software application. And I've heard there's some development going on along those lines as well too, but I feel there's not enough of this type of thinking that I showed earlier with the airline flight scheduling and the data.gov that can be applied to what's going on in Building Smart with BIM. And if we do that, it'll open up the door for a lot of developers to come in and create software solutions with this valuable data. So we saw a little bit of the result earlier of what happens when you open up data to software developers to access and create tools like the airline search tool. There's a great presentation on TED. If you look at TED and type in coding government data, there it is right there, Jennifer Palka. She talks about how information that was made accessible again through web services was used to create a solution for a city. It's a very interesting TED talk about that. I recommend to watch it. Its topic is, can government be run like the internet? So we need to get this kind of thinking into the Building Smart Alliance. So the technology has changed very rapidly in the last few years with smartphones and tablets just completely turning things upside down. I think that now is the opportunity for Building Smart, with the immense amount of information that we have been processing and structuring, to get something out there, even a very simple thing out there for the industry to start using. Otherwise, we won't tie into the opportunity that's sitting right in front of us. Thank you.